welcome to Morning Movie News. Hello, and welcome to Morning Movie News. Today's episode is a little bit late going up because I was invited by 20th Century Fox to a special sneak peek of their holiday slate of movies. So if you'd like to hear my thoughts on these films that are still coming together, Penguins of Madagascar and Night at the Museum 3, you can head over to the main Beyond the Trailer channel for that video. But today, we're going to talk about 3 news stories that have nothing to do with comic books. I could tell from the comments that a few of you would like to have a comic book, especially Marvel breather, and today, that's exactly what we're going to do, with 3 very interesting stories, and then the viewer question does have to deal with comic book movies, just for good measure. Alright, so something for everyone. So we're going to start out with a story that has quite a bit of momentum, more momentum than I would have expected, and who knows if it's because people are excited about it, upset about it, or like myself, not quite sure how to feel about it. I would suspect it's the latter, and that's why this is probably still trending on Twitter hours, a day after it was announced that Paul Feig would be directing not just the new Ghostbusters, but an all-female version of The Crew. Now, we discussed this before when this was a rumor, an all-female Ghostbusters, and I said back then that I felt it was a mistake. I don't think it's good to have, for 2 reasons. One, I don't think it's good that for women to have a franchise, they have to, be by themselves. They can't operate with the rest of the group. Just making it an all-female Ghostbusters just kind of puts it off to a side category. I just feel it's kind of like, with all due respect to those who have attended same-sex schools, the real world is not same-sex, it's mixed. So you should really get experience out there in the real world as you will experience when you venture out beyond the walls of your school. And I feel the same way here. I'm all for having a more diverse group of Ghostbusters, but to put it all in another category just feels, side-pocketed, not in the main spectrum of things. The other problem I have with it, as I said before, is it's exclusionary. I feel, it's no fun to say there can't be any no girls allowed, but I don't think turning around and saying no boys allowed is much better. But we'll see how this turns out. And again, I'm surprised by the level of interest in this, and I'm, again, not quite sure where it's coming from. So I'd really like to know from you guys why you think this is still trending. Is it excitement, disgust, or, again, like myself, confusion? So how is the project coming together? Well, Paul Feig is already signed on officially now, and one of you actually sent me a link to an interview that he did over Entertainment Weekly, so thank you for that over on Twitter. Paul Feig talked about how he was approached to direct a new version of Ghostbusters just in general, and he was sitting down taking the meeting, and he said the only way he could possibly see himself doing it if it was an all-female crew of Ghostbusters. Now, this has become Paul Feig's specialty. The 2 big films he's directed are Bridesmaids and The Heat. And so I think that he feels that's his proven commodity. That's where he's a proven commodity, and he knows what he's doing. And also has his connections. You can be sure he's on his phone right now, going through his Rolodex, talking to all the women he's worked with. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Melissa McCarthy on this team, maybe Kristen Wiig, and then potentially Sandra Bullock even. But I think Sandra Bullock is probably, I don't know. You would think she might be too big for this after Gravity, but she was so good in Miss Congeniality. I would love The Heat, by the way. So we'll see. I'm still not convinced that Bridesmaids' success didn't come from Kristen Wiig and Annie Mamulo, I think her name is, the co-writer with Wiig. I feel that's where a lot of the success of that film came from. The Heat did very well, but The Heat felt very TV to me. It felt not, worthy of the big screen, and certainly I didn't see anything that showed me someone could present something as cinematic as Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters was cinematic not just on the level of the storytelling and the humor, but also with the cinematography and the way the shots were put together. It felt like you were watching a great comedy movie, an instant classic, but I've never seen that from Paul Feig. I hope this just isn't, one big SNL sketch, which is where my concern lies. Now, the other problem is that the screenwriter who's attached is Katie Dippold, or Dippold. She's new on the scene. She wrote The Heat, and she's grown very close with Paul Feig, and he considers her part of his team. So he said they were working on an idea for The Heat 2. Sandra Bullock doesn't want to necessarily make a sequel. Will she do a reboot, or whatever this might be? Let's see. But so now he's put Katie Dippold, I said, on this. And again, I thought the script was weak on The Heat, so she's not really somebody who would be my first choice. And also, I don't see why a woman has to necessarily write a female comedy, and some of you might be like, well, Grace, you're always really supporting the way female characters are presented, but I would say, at the same time, again, it's not, no one's going to feel there's a win here if suddenly we just kick all the men out of Hollywood or out of certain films. I just think that's a mistake. I would like to see, if I had to pick someone, a female actress to take part in this. Some people are saying Emma Stone. I don't know about Emma Stone right now, considering how the Spider-Man movies performed. I don't know if she's a great choice. I would love to see Tina Fey. I think Tina Fey is a great writer for this and has a really great brand of humor, and I could see her actually being a Ghostbuster in real life. She has a little bit of even of an Annie Potts vibe going on there. Maybe Annie Potts' daughter, if this isn't a reboot, she could be on the team. But at the same time, I think Tina Fey, unless she has just the perfect cast surrounding her, has had some box office flops. I think she's not a proven commodity and could be risky for this. But this is being sold on a high concept platter, an all-female Ghostbusters. And I'm wondering how this will work out. Will the community support it? Will everyone go and see it? And I think it's all, if you're going to have an all-female comedy, that's fine. Everyone enjoyed Bridesmaids, both men and women. But to take something that's so well-known, the Ghostbusters, and turn them into something that's, all women, I don't know. I think it's a mistake, and I think that it, speaks to the segregation of Hollywood that we all have a problem with. Instead of, for the love of God, just make a movie that includes everybody so everyone can see it together. I don't see why we have to keep divvying it up to different teams. All right, so that's the first story of the day. The second story is about these pictures that were released of Mark Wahlberg in The Gambler. This is his big Oscar contender, and he's decided to take a page from McConaughey's book because The Fighter bid for an Oscar did not work out. He was not even nominated, but of course the film went on to win Oscars for both Christian Bale and Melissa Leo. And poor Mark Wahlberg, who produced the thing and put it all together, revived David O. Russell's career by letting him direct the movie, even though nobody in town wanted to touch him after he blew up opposite Lily Tomlin on I Heart Huckabees. Mark Wahlberg made all that happen, made David O. Russell, a new wave, actually more celebrated than he's ever been before, got Oscars for Bale and Leo, and nothing for himself. So he's trying again, and he's lost an incredible amount of weight for this role. It's a remake, actually, The Gambler, and it's about a literature professor, an English literature professor, who has a gambling problem. Now, I think the real feat will be Mark Wahlberg playing a convincing English literature professor. But if he can pull that off, I think he can, be a major, contender for at least a nomination. I think it would be very hard for him to outright win because he has sowed the seeds that McConaughey did. McConaughey did quite a few films prior to Dallas Buyers Club, like Bernie, Mud, a couple, I believe a few others that really put him on people's radars. The Lincoln Lawyer, and someone who wanted to change, who was trying to do a 180 with his career. But Mark Wahlberg, this is really a first step. I don't know if this is going to be right at putting him at the Oscar doorstep. Although I think the talent involved is very good. You have Brie Larson, very hot right now in terms of ingenues in Hollywood. Then, of course, Jessica Lange. Everyone loves her from American Horror Story. And then the director, this is very interesting, is Rupert Wyatt. This is where he went after Rise of the Planet of the Apes. He, of course, didn't sign on for the sequel because he didn't like the timeline that was presented to him, so he's gone off and he's making this movie. And I thought he did a very good job with Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Very, very well-directed film. So I think that he is someone who I would trust, to see what he does next. I also think that the shots should look really interesting. There's like a little bit of a Fincher quality to them, but of course they're warmer. But I think that the angles that are chosen and the framing are very nice. So I'm curious about this, and I am a fan of Mark Wahlberg. I really like what he's done with his career. He's kind of like an older Channing Tatum, you could say, almost. But Channing Tatum is like Mark Wahlberg on fast forward. But Mark Wahlberg's, I really always admire anyone who tries to see what they can do behind the scenes and in front of the scenes to push themselves. And of course, he's a very prolific producer at this point, having produced both Entourage and Boardwalk Empire. So kudos to this, and I'm curious to what you guys think if this looks like a good film to you. Now, for the third story, we're going to move on to someone who's worked on 2 films with Mark Wahlberg, another person that Mark Wahlberg has helped get into Hollywood. This case, for the first time, David O. Russell was getting back in. And that's the director from Iceland, Baltasar Kormákur. And Baltasar Kormákur directed Contraband for Wahlberg, and that was a film that was a remake of Kormákur's film Contraband that he made in his native country, and then Mark Wahlberg wanted to remake it and brought over Kormákur to do so. And then Kormákur went on to do another film with Mark Wahlberg, and that was Two Guns opposite Denzel Washington. Now, Kormákur now has his own project that he just had Universal pick up, and it's a Vikings movie. And I think we're all very excited to see a Vikings project. The History Channel's TV show, I don't watch it. I don't really know anyone who does watch it, but I think it's still on. But I don't think that's really captured people's attention or imagination the way people are hoping with a Viking property. Now, of course, Leonardo DiCaprio has been working very hard to get a Viking film off the ground. Has not worked for him, and I wonder how he feels about being beaten to the punch by Cormaker. I think Cormaker probably used his trump card, which is he's from the land of the Vikings, so I think he really wants to play up the mythology, etc. But DiCaprio, I think we all would love to see that Viking movie, no matter what happens with Cormaker's project. So Cormaker, I would say based on Contraband and Two Guns, I don't think this is a guy who has an epic film in him. But maybe he'll change our minds with Everest, which he's working on right now. I believe it's in post, maybe. And this is a film, of course, about a very ill-fated climb up Mount Everest that stars Jake Gyllenhaal and also Jason Clarke. I believe that's the name. Of course, interestingly, we're talking about Apes franchise. He starred in the second film. So that's a very solid cast, and from what I've seen of the on-set photos, it looks somewhat more epic than Cormaker's previous work. So I'm glad he's moving up. That's also for Universal, by the way. So I guess they like what they see when they look at the rushes for Everest. If you're not familiar with the term, rushes is the footage from set. They record through I forget the name of the term of what the equipment's called. It's the monitor where you can watch what's being filmed. The director can sit there and watch it. Well, they record that so they can send it to the producer and all the people who are involved with the movie so they can keep an eye on how things are progressing and what kind of products coming out of the shoot. So they're called rushes. So I guess Universal likes what they see because they bought this from Cormaker. Although I have to say, while there haven't been a lot of Viking movies, and I've recommended this one before, I highly recommend you watch The Vikings, the 1958 movie with Kirk Douglas and Tony Curtis. It's not big on authenticity. It's very much the 1950s version of The Vikings, but I think it's very close, and it's a really good story and a really great movie that I actually watched, I think, at least twice by now, but I saw it the first time when I was younger, like a kid, and it really stuck with me. It's one of those movies where it makes an impression. All right, so the question of the day. The question comes from Lex Buther, and Lex Buther says, question: we are seeing a general tendency of creating cinematic universes and fantasy franchises. We certainly are. However, none of this tendency is being rewarded in the awards season. Not totally true. Lord of the Rings, the final chapter of the first trilogy was a big awards winner at the Oscars. And of course, The Dark Knight was a winner for Heath Ledger posthumously. And, I think people feel it was legitimately robbed of Best Director, Best Picture nominations, which I agree with that. So we've seen some recognition, and that's going to tie into my answer. But Lex Buther continues saying, can't a comic movie be considered a good movie? Captain America 2 did a great job in that regard. I would even go so far as suggesting the possibility of creating a new category, like he says, although not likely, saying like a best blockbuster picture or a best fantasy picture. As a comic book fan, he says, I love this one. Best comic book picture. We sure would have candidates, and I feel that franchises are not being given the deserved recognition. This may seem a silly question. It does not, but I think the industry is changing, and I really think awards should shape to it, even if I am still a fan of the usual Oscar-nominated movie. Sorry for the long post. Hope you pick it up. I did. Smiley faces times infinity. Alex. Great question, Alex. And I think as we head into award season, and also you're seeing blockbusters and Oscar-nominated style movies sharing the same space now because holidays have become such a great time to launch blockbusters like Mockingjay and, of course, the final Hobbit film that we're seeing them all in the same conversation, at least with us. So should they be in the same conversation with fans? I say yes and no. I mean, you do see sci-fi movies starting to move into the space. Gravity, big film that got a lot of nominations. And I think you also saw Avatar, of course, so famously or infamously, considering how you feel about the film. But then even Inglourious Basterds was a big Oscar contender, winning for Christoph Waltz, and so was Django Unchained. And those are very pulpy, genre-y films. So you saw them get recognition as well. And I think the comic book movies just quite aren't there yet. I think they're very good, Alex. I think they are well-made movies, and Captain America is certainly a fine example. But they're still not at the level where I think they need to be Oscar-nominated. Well, Captain America is a great movie, The Winter Soldier. I would actually say it's no longer my favorite movie of the year. I'd have to say that's Whiplash, but now it's like number 2. But anyway, I think that you can see right there, Whiplash overtook it. And I think that they need to work to get movies to a certain level like The Dark Knight or Avatar, and they have to be on a grander scale, either in terms of the special effects that they contribute or the storytelling. I think that the storytelling just still quite isn't there with comic book films. And I think you can't create genre categories, because then how do you do that not with other films? Sorry about the construction noise if that has come in. I was filming during their lunch break. They're doing a lot of construction next to our office. But I think that how would you not have a best thriller then, or best comedy? You know, the comedy genre isn't very well recognized either with the Academy Awards, and you just simply can't do it. And I think we do have our examples of genre films, comic book movies that have competed, and some of them have won. I don't think anyone's really won the best, the big prize yet, besides Lord of the Rings. That obviously was able to get in there. And I think that when films have the proper scope and seriousness, and they operate at the levels they need to be Oscar worthy, the Academy does recognize them. So I think we're getting closer and closer. Marvel isn't quite in this zone yet. We'll see what happens with Zack. But Zack Snyder's not that kind of talent either. They need to find this talent, and that's the way it's going to work out. If you bring in talent that is Oscar, in the same, in step with Oscar. Christopher Nolan is very much that kind of a filmmaker. James Cameron certainly knows what Oscar likes. Alfonso Cuarón, very much an artiste. So we haven't seen that kind of talent working with Marvel yet, or DC to that regard, post-Nolan. So that's, I think, how they have to do that. So I think I think the recognition is there, Alex, and I think it'll be interesting to see just how much more the genre progresses in terms of fantasy and comic books, or if people don't realize that someone needs to pick up where Nolan and Jackson and Cameron have, and even Tarantino have left off. Where are the next versions of those filmmakers? All right, so thank you so much for your question, Alex. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Please write down below what you think of today's top 3 stories and the viewer question. Anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.